4:30 has arrived, so I will call to order the Finance Committee meeting of Monday, February 28th, 2022, and ask Dave to call the roll, please.
Council President Abbas is excused. Alder Carter is excused. Alder Verveer. Alder Furman.
I'm here. Thank you.
Alder Figueroa Cole.
Here.
Alder Curry.
Here.
Mayor.
Present.
Mayor, you have quorum.
Thank you. Joe, do you want to give us the meeting instructions, please?
Sure. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. All panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Please continue to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak. The name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. City staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the Finance Committee, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I would like to note that Alder Verveer has joined us. We have no general public comment. So are there any disclosures or recusals on items on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have registrants on item 6, so we will exclude that item from the consent agenda. Are there other items that alders would like to have excluded from the consent agenda? Alder Verveer?
Thank you, Mayor. I have questions on agenda items 2 through 5 and agenda item number 7, please.
All right, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7. Any other items for exclusion from the consent agenda?
Oh, I have.
Alder Figueroa Cole?
Oh my goodness, the one about a sole source agreement for IT, I think it was. Let me find it. Oh, found it. I don't know if Verveer said that one, but number 12. I just have questions about that.
Number 12 will be excluded. Any other exclusions from the consent agenda? All right, I will note that we also have, we're excluding 7, so I'll note that later. We also have a registrant in support on item 18, not wishing to speak. So our consent agenda will be items 8 through 11, and then 13 through 19. On those items, we'll note that the recommendation on, I believe it's item 10, is to refer to the March 7th Finance Committee meeting. So that will be assumed in the motion, and that there's an updated fiscal note on item 17. And so with all of that, Alder Verveer, could I ask you to make the motion, please?
I move to adopt the consent agenda, Mayor, as articulated by you.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Alders. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of the consent agenda? Seeing no objection, we'll record that vote. So then on item 2, which is Legistar 69927, Alder Revere, is it the same question for items 2 through 5?
Yes, Mayor, they're obviously all very similar, and so I would move that we adopt those together in mass.
Thank you, Alder Revere. So I'll just go through quickly. It's item 2 is Legistar 69927. 3 is 69928, 4 is 69932, and 5 is 69936. All of these having to do with recreating vacant positions in the Metro's operating budget. So Alder Revere will move adoption on all 4 of those items together. Is there a second? Alder Figueroa Cole will second them. And Alder Revere, you have questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I think these would best be for Justin, although I certainly appreciate Iman's presence and the HR memo that's in this Legistar file, which provided additional details as each of the resolutions were pretty much identical, but pretty brief. So Justin, at the outset, do you want to just provide an overview of each of these agenda items? Or would you like me to go right to a couple of specific questions that I have for you?
Sure, I'm happy to do an overview.
Thank you.
Yep. So it's 4 resolutions comprising 5 positions. So one of them is for 2 positions that are the same and will be the same. Basically, what I'm proposing here is to take 5 vacant positions and reclassify them into other already established classifications. So adding FTEs in other existing classifications. The positions that I'm creating are manager level positions, and they really reflect 2 things. One, as are moving forward with the BRT and with the network redesign and our technology project and various other major initiatives, we do have a need for some higher level support at Metro, and so, the intent behind these resolutions is to kind of upgrade a vacant position into a higher level. These would all be creating additional manager roles that would help to oversee our daily operations, but also the implementation of a lot of these major projects going forward. So that's the plan, kind of at a high level. There's a second phase that's kind of hinted at here in the memo that would come later. And that is, once we anticipate many of these to be internal promotions. And so once we go through that hiring process and determine that, there's a potential that we may upgrade some of the newly vacant positions to a higher level as well. But that's to be determined, once we see those promotions that do or do not happen. And really, what we're trying to achieve here is the ability to bring in the higher level support, but also to fill some of these positions. Many of these general supervisor positions that we'd be recreating at a higher level, we've had several failed recruitments on already. That just the salary is not competitive in these roles, is not competitive with other transit agencies around the country. And when you take into account the overtime changes that happen as you move up in levels, aren't even competitive for internal promotions. And so basically what we've had is that folks that at the frontline supervisor level, they get time and a half overtime, moving up into the general supervisor role where they go to straight time overtime or comp time. Really represents very little or no benefit to them financially, because many of them are working significant levels of overtime. And so they just haven't been applying. And so we've had several failed recruitments on that front. So this is really twofold, to bring in higher level support for the major projects and also hopefully improve our ability to actually fill some of these positions.
Thank you for the overview, Justin. And thanks for mentioning the second phase that we'll be seeing sometime in the future. I was curious as to the second phase. Does the second phase anticipate converting any additional Comp Group 41 and 42 positions that are currently in the local 695 bargaining unit?
No.
Very good. And is the agenda item that relates to the accountant that's before us, which is agenda item number 5, is that a subject of the WERC petition that I believe is still pending that the city has filed that local 695 is contesting?
Yes, that is one of the positions that is within that. So that position is vacant. And Jennifer's here too, if any specific questions for her on the finance team. But that position would be covered by that. But really that position currently is vacant. As we implement some of the technology projects, we anticipate a lot of the finance responsibilities to shift. And so there's still a potential that we may want to add a position back in the future, but we really want to make sure that once we get our new systems in place, we add it where we need it. And so, right now we don't feel that we have that need. Most of the work is getting done, with the existing Teamster staff that we have in finance. There is some small exceptions that where some management staff are doing for a short period of time while we've got some folks out on long-term leave that are, Teamster staff. But we do anticipate all of that union work to stay with union staff in the long term.
Thank you. I appreciate those responses. I don't see anyone here from the city attorney's office presently, or Harper. So perhaps I'll ask Iman, can you are you comfortable explaining the WERC process and the potential timeline, or is that more appropriately answered by you, Justin, perhaps?
This is Iman. I'm sorry, I am not equipped to answer that timeline question. It would be more appropriate for someone from labor relations, either Greg or Aaron.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I can answer some of that as I've been.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah. So there is currently a hearing scheduled for that matter. Right now, I have it on my calendar. Let's see here for March 23rd. So at this point, my understanding is, there'll be a hearing held in the morning of March 23rd for both sides to kind of lay out their arguments for the petition, and then the union staff will have their opportunity as well to discuss why they, feel that we shouldn't move those positions outside of the bargaining unit. I've never done one of these before, so I'm not sure if a decision is made that day or if we get a decision, in writing later on.
I see. Yeah, that was my next question. As I was curious if anyone in this meeting knew what the timeline might be for the WERC adjudicator to make a ruling. But
yeah, that I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask this, Justin, and perhaps Jennifer as well. Could you articulate, please, the timeliness of recreating this account clerk 3 to the marketing customer service manager position? All things being equal, it certainly would be my preference and make me more comfortable if we could perhaps refer agenda item number 5 until after the WERC hearing in a few weeks. Is that something that you would find potentially okay, or is that something that you're not comfortable with?
I would certainly prefer not to. These projects are significant, and that role in particular, the marketing customer service, is going to be very important for us as we move towards implementation of a network redesign once that is approved by the council. As you know, hiring process takes a long time, so I'm really trying to get someone on board around the time that the council adopts whatever the network redesign is, and so that person is kind of hitting the ground running and ready to do all the implementation work in terms of communicating with our writers, developing the schedules, developing all the marketing materials, all of that to really communicate the plan to everyone and really help everyone understand how their trip might change and how they might use the system in the future. So I do think that, as Jennifer pointed out, the hearing may be in about a month, but, we don't know exactly when the ruling will be. And that could take some additional time there. And so, my preference is certainly to move this forward. I think the reality is that position is vacant, and we don't have any plans to fill it in the near term. And so I don't know that it's really not displacing a union member in the short term, but in either case.
Right. This position's on my team. That position has been without someone in it since August. And since I got here in June, we have been able to shift around some duties in order to cover the leave that person had. And then with them not coming back to the office, we've been able to easily fulfill that person's duties within the rest of the staff within the bargaining unit. We do also have, like Justin had said, between our technology infrastructure, it's going to be making a large change on how we're going to be implementing payroll. And so I anticipate having some more efficiencies. And so I wasn't planning on filling that position until that project was implemented to see if we needed that role in a different capacity in the future.
Thank you. So, Justin, if this resolution is adopted by the council, then you plan to advertise the position immediately, I take it?
Yes.
So
as soon as the process goes through, yeah.
What's the impact if we do receive an adverse ruling from WERC? Then what would your next course of action be?
That doesn't really change anything about this role. I mean, I think from our perspective, whether that the finance unit is within the bargaining unit, the Teamsters unit or not, I don't know that really changes a whole lot about how we operate. And, in either case, I still think that this position isn't necessary. And so, I don't think we wouldn't plan to fill this position regardless of how the ERC ruling comes down.
All right. Thank you both for your responses. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there other questions on items 2 through 5? Seeing none. It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion on items 2 through 5? Seeing none. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of items 2 through 5? Seeing no objection, we'll record that vote. And we will come to item 6, which is Legistar 69987, authorizing allocation of Arpa funds to support community-based organizations serving undocumented immigrant residents. On item 6, we have registrants, starting with Steve Maurice of District 14, representing the Catholic Multicultural Center, to be followed by Asa Olivares.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the committee for allowing me to speak and for making these funds available to serve the undocumented immigrant community. So I'm the Associate Director of the Catholic Multicultural Center, and I have just a few comments regarding the funding recommendations that were made by the Community Services Committee. So last year, the CMC served 2,017 unduplicated individuals and provided over 6,500 instances of service last year. The people we serve came from at least 75 different countries of origin and speak 26 different first languages. So we are truly a multicultural center that serves a cross-section of the community. And of those folks we served, approximately 1/3 were undocumented by the definition of this grant. So CMC was recommended to receive $50,000 from the committee after originally being recommended for $100,000 by city staff. So clearly a 50% reduction will limit the number of people that we can serve and provide financial assistance to, and thereby reducing overall the number of individuals who will benefit from the total $700,000. The current recommendation will also reduce the number of non-Latinos who will be served because the Community Services Committee seemed to consolidate much of the funding with agencies who serve exclusively Latino clients. So it seems as if the current funding recommendation is choosing winners or losers among the immigrant groups in the community. It would seem that spreading the funding more equitably among agencies would allow more immigrant groups to access the funds. And I would suggest that the original staff recommendations did just that. But even recognizing that the majority of undocumented individuals residing in Madison are Latino, the current recommendation also reduces the amount of assistance that Latino clients may receive because each agency must necessarily put a cap on the assistance they provide to any one household. So for example, an individual who applies to Centro Hispano for financial assistance could also come to the CMC and receive assistance. But if our funding is significantly curtailed, then we may not be able to serve that individual. Thus, the benefit they receive from the total $700,000 is reduced. My impression of the original RFP was that the City of Madison wished to level the playing field for undocumented individuals in the face of the pandemic because they were not eligible for stimulus funds and other government benefits. To accomplish that, it would seem that funding a greater number of agencies, providing a greater number of services with equitable amounts of funding to serve a more diverse group of immigrants would best advance the goal of making these ARPA funds available to meet the needs of the most undocumented households. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Aisa Oliveras of District 11, representing the Community Immigration Law Center, to be followed by Kajwa Vaj.
Thank you, and thank you to this committee and the Community Development Division for considering all of the applications before it. My name is Aisa Olivares, and I'm an immigration attorney, specifically the managing attorney for the Community Immigration Law Center, or SILC. I'm here to explain more about the project we proposed and its importance in our community. I would also like to say that I believe strongly in this work and in the population this money intends to serve. My comment today is not about who should get what funding and why. All of the organizations who applied for this funding are worthy and do very important work in our community. As you can see from all of our applications, the undocumented community is not a monolith. There are a population whose needs have been exacerbated by the pandemic, and one of those is access to justice. The Community Immigration Law Center's work with the undocumented community is well established through the free walk-in legal clinic we have run since 2009 that has served individuals from 160 different countries, the Deportation Defense Program that we have run out of Christ Presbyterian Church since 2017, and currently through the triage asylum consultations we have given individuals who are seeking asylum in Madison. Additionally, and unique to most legal service providers, all of the work in our deportation defense program and our asylum orientations are provided at absolutely no cost. The contact that we have had with asylum seekers on a triage basis have been overwhelmingly Latinx and Spanish speaking. However, we serve clients at risk of deportation from all over the world. Asylum seekers are overwhelmingly new to our community and have a high need for connection to the resources necessary to navigate the city of Madison and get settled into our community. I did send an email with an attachment regarding the numbers of individuals that we serve, both through our direct representation project called our Universal Representation Project and our Silk Friday Legal Clinic. That is where we gave a short snapshot of the individuals we served over 4 months of our program, and how we got to our 160 countries that we serve through that free legal clinic. The reason a program addressing the needs of local asylum seekers is important is that while they are undocumented during the process, they are technically also on a path to achieving an immigration status that gives them access to the benefits afforded to lawful permanent residents and eventually U.S. citizens. The hard part is navigating that path, which is loaded with very specific guidelines, high legal standards, and interactions with multiple agencies. Our project has proposed dispersing information regarding this asylum process, including the rights of asylum seekers, and guiding individuals to gain key knowledge of the asylum process so that they may be equipped with the tools necessary to represent themselves before an immigration judge based on fear of return to their home country. Success in this process brings them asylee and hopefully eventually lawful permanent resident status. It protects them from being deported to a country they fear returning to, and it keeps families together. Ultimately, the work we propose is holistic in nature and provides guidance at
Mayor, that's time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Kajwa Vaj of Grandview Boulevard, to be followed by Mankar Danway.
Hi, am I on?
You are.
Okay, this is Kajwa. I'm here to probably give some clarity about our proposal. I want to thank the city staff for making a recommendation to put us back into the pot of funding. And that one of the reasons why our proposal was late is our longtime developer court director was transitioning when she's moved out of the state, and it was actually her last week at work at FI. And in addition to that, she normally says that her city grants were normally due around 4. And so right quickly after noon, I think she realized that the deadline had passed. And so she did actually call city staff right away. And so that was one of the reasons why our proposal was late. I think that I want to address equity versus equality. I think we all know that oftentimes, people miss deadlines, but you look at the pot of funding and you look at who's being funded and what communities is being served. And I just want to commend the city staff to say and to look at this and say, hey, it's not equitable. It may be equal, but it's not equitable in that there's a population that's missing out, that's not being served. The other issue that I want to bring up is a lot of the times people look at Southeast Asians or particularly Hmong and Cambodian folks, even Laotian folks and Vietnamese folks in the city of Madison and in the surrounding in the city of Madison particularly, and think, how can this group of population be undocumented? Did they come into this country as refugees? And there are many ways that even refugees don't necessarily become residents or citizens. But if you work with this population, you understand why there are many undocumented Southeast Asians in our community. Number one, abusive international marriage is something that we've been working on for a long time. This is when people are sponsored from the homelands to come here as brides or as fiancés, and they end up in abusive marriages or situations, and their permanent residency never get, not permanent residency, their visas never get turned into permanent residency, therefore they become undocumented. There are many refugees who've come into this country who also, for whatever reasons as children, did not get there due to financial situations or language barriers, did not convert their statuses from refugees to permanent residents to a citizen, and then end up in the legal system and not becoming citizens and have final orders of deportation. So that these are just a few of the ways that Southeast Asians become undocumented in this country. In Madison, you do have quite a few families who are struggling as undocumented people. The other reason why I think that this proposal, Freedom Inc.'s proposal, should be reconsidered is that we're serving a population, even though folks perhaps from African countries or even Southeast Asian countries, we're serving a population that is surviving gender-based violence. And I say that because there may be other organizations who are getting funded to serve this population.
Here, that's time.
Our population is very unique to being domestic violence and sexual assault survivors, and they may not go anywhere else for services. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Mankar Dawe of District 14.
Hi, everyone. I'm speaking here today to say that Freedom Inc.'s proposal needs to be reconsidered. And I actually agree with the original recommendations that city staff proposed. Kajwa already explained the transitions that were going on. I think another organization, Unidos, also has some transitioning going on and missed the deadline because it was different than what it usually is for city funding. But I just want to continue this concept that Kajwa just raised around, equity versus equality, and bring the aspect of safety and dignity into this, right? So, yes, when you look at the plain numbers and you say we want to get this race or ethnic group, that leaves out considerations around safety and dignity for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, or those who are still going through it, right? Victims. The folks that we serve know that we are the undocumented folks we serve, know that we're not going to leave a paper trail. We're not going to ask them to show their ID or to register or check a box about anything. And then two, they know that our space is free. Is free from folks who they've identified as their abusers. Our space, we're not afraid to make our space free, and free of folks that have been identified as abusers. Of course, we offer transformative justice processes and things, but we are very clear that we prioritize victims and survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault and intimate partner violence. And so that's another way that we will actually be missing a whole group of people that actually need this the most. Anyone who knows about gender-based violence knows that a huge part of that is isolation. And being ostracized, and that's tenfold when it comes to immigrant and refugee populations. Having grown up as a child of someone who sought asylum in this country, your community is the only thing you have a lot of times, and when you're shunned from that group because your abuser is in those spaces, it's much more of a dire situation, and that can jeopardize your safety, right? Whether that's someone then looking to commit suicide, or someone then is going to be more ostracized from their communities. I saw it happen to my mother. And so that's why I'm here, fighting for this funding to be reconsidered to Freedom Inc. And let's side with fighting for safety and dignity over deadlines. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all of our registrants on item 6. Are there questions for any of the registrants? Seeing none. Alder Verveer, can I get a motion, please?
I move to adopt the substitute resolution.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt the substitute. Are there questions for staff? Seeing Alder Figueroa Cole.
Yes, thank you. I have a few questions for Yolanda. Oh, hi, Yolanda. Thank you for being there. Can you give the committee a overview of the process related to this funding? Maybe starting from the charge of the council of request to coming down to RFP and making a decision on who to fund, please.
Can everyone hear me? All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Yolanda Shelton Morris. I am the Community Resources Manager in the Community Development Division and oversee the staff who oversee this funding process. So to just give a brief recap, when these funds were allocated to CDD back in July of 2021, we were charged by the council to implement some type of funding process to allocate these funds. First step was to really get a sense of the organizations in the city of Madison that serve the undocumented immigrant population. And so we engaged community stakeholders to understand key issues facing different community groups in order to develop a focused application process to distribute these funds. In October 2021, we issued a survey to providers who have a history of working with the immigrant populations in Madison to gather additional input about services, as well as staff conducted one-on-one meetings with providers to gather additional feedback. From those processes, we identified a total of 15 providers, and based on feedback from those organizations, some of the following or key challenges that were identified were food insecurity, legal assistance, workplace safety, housing, language barriers, transportation, navigating the healthcare system, and financial hardships. The top three of those key challenges that I just mentioned were housing, financial hardship, and legal assistance. And so using that information is what helped to inform our application process. We opted to do as simple as an application process as possible and release that application process in late 2021 or in early 2022, excuse me. From that application process, we had a number of, well, first I should probably mention in terms of the target population. And so this was, for the purposes of the application process, residents whose legal status generally limits their access to public benefits. So this includes undocumented immigrants and refugees that could have a variety of statuses. Our scope of services were outlined in the application guidelines as one-time funding opportunity, developed in part with the feedback that we received from community partners through our stakeholder engagement process. And we wanted these funds to be used, are intended to be used in a flexible manner and available really to support programming and services to our undocumented immigrant residents. And so some of those types of services were direct financial assistance / cash transfers, support for legal assistance, transportation, utility bills, navigating the healthcare system, or other needs that are identified by the resident or household that the agency is serving. We recognize that we were encouraging agencies to direct individuals and families to the Dane Core Emergency Rental Assistance Program, as immigration status is not a determinant of eligibility for that federal rental assistance. However, we did recognize that there are individuals and families who may face other barriers that may make them ineligible for that assistance through that program. And so that is where the direct financial assistance / cash transfer opportunity aligns within the scope of services for the use of funds. So 19 proposals were submitted, of which 14 were initially considered based on criteria outlined in the application guidelines. It's important to note, and I know it's already been shared via one of the residents or registrants this evening, that one proposal was considered by staff or reconsidered by staff due to their application being the only application that identified serving predominantly Southeast Asian households. And so as staff, we made a decision to reconsider them for funding. The application was late. However, we decided to reconsider that application due to the fact that the population that the application intended it would serve is the only applicant that we received that stated that. So in total, we reviewed a total of 15 eligible proposals, requesting an aggregate a total of $2 million. And the proposal budgets were between a minimum of $75,000 and a maximum of $150,000, as outlined in the application guidelines. Proposals are reviewed by CDD staff who took a number of variables into consideration, such as the application score, the population to be served, connections to and record of supporting the specific population to be served, the identification of relevant staff working with and supporting the undocumented immigrant population, the process for allocating those resources to the target population, and the agency's proposed budget to ensure it is reasonable and the majority of funds would be allocated to support the needs of the undocumented immigrant residents and households. Another important key variable that factored into staff developing funding recommendations includes demographic data. Although there is very little data available to accurately describe the population of undocumented immigrants in Madison, staff did review data from the American Community Survey for the city of Madison, which is a 5-year average. So the most recent year of data we have was from 2019. The data does not separate undocumented residents from non-citizen residents. Rather, it is broken out by population, nativity, non-citizenship, and non-citizenship of low-income residents. Upon further analysis of this microdata, which contained only a few data points, staff decided to analyze a much larger sample of that census data. And when the larger sample was analyzed, staff found that non-citizens below the 200 federal poverty line are 6 times more likely to be Latinx than Asian and 3 times more likely to be Latinx than Black. So that comes out to 59% for our Latinx population, 17% for our Black population, 10% for our Asian population, and 14% for other. So it is not perfect data, but it is the data that we had, and it is the data that we use in determining our staff recommendations. Another thing I think is important to note is it's difficult to precisely compare the composition of the population that we're trying to serve through these funds. That's because some, but not all organizations are proposing to serve multiple ethnic groups. But what we can say is that nearly 60% of the funds in the staff recommendations were to be allocated to organizations serving solely Latinx households, nearly 15% to those serving only African households, and about 10% to those serving predominantly Asian households. The remaining 15% will go to organizations proposing to serve multiple groups. We know that, and the data tells us that the highest undocumented immigrant population in the city is Latinx. However, we also recognize other groups and wanted to ensure funding is also available to support them as well. So I will pause there and see if there are any additional questions.
Thank you, Yolanda. Alder Figueroa-Cole, did you have additional questions?
One more question, Joanna. Thank you for such a detailed recap. So when council charges you with something to do or ask you to do something or whatever, is this the process that you usually follow for all the RFPs? Do you have standard operating procedures that say, we go back to the community, we figure out what they need, we do a survey, do you have processes in place to manage each funding, or is this a one-time deal that we did for this one?
We always have a process where we engage our community partners in the stakeholder engagement feedback process to get an understanding of what the need is. That information helps to inform our application RFP process. I would say what is different maybe from this process versus others is we really were trying to work as diligently as we could to get the funds out the door quicker. And so normally we are, most of our funding processes, we issue a policy concept paper that kind of outlines the why behind why we're looking to do a funding process. What does the data tell us? What is the need? And kind of what are we proposing in terms of guidelines for the RFP? We didn't do that this time. We just did a more concentrated stakeholder engagement feedback process where we sought to identify those organizations that are serving undocumented immigrants currently and having conversations with them to get a better understanding of what the key needs are that they're seeing, as well as issuing a survey. So it was kind of two-part in that we had the survey, but we also had one-on-one conversations with agencies as well.
Thank you, Yolanda.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Curry, questions?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Yolanda. Thank you for all that information. I didn't catch the numbers, but you had shared from CDD staff recommendations, the percentages by identity of and I guess, two-tiered question. Have you had an opportunity to review the recommendations from the Community Services Committee, and does that change any of those percentages that you had given us?
It does. For CDD's recommendation in serving the Latinx population, it was 61% versus Community Services Committee's recommendation is 79% for the Latinx population. For the African population, it was 23% for CDD staff versus 16% for the Community Services Committee's recommendation. For the Asian population, it was 12%. Versus 1% for the Community Services Committee's recommendation. And for the other population, pretty similar, 4% for CDD and 3% for the CSC.
Thank you. You also indicated that there was an exception given for Freedom Inc. due to being the only applicant indicating service to the Southeast Asian population.
That is correct. And that was a recommendation that came a part of staff recommendations. Ultimately, CSC did not agree with that recommendation. And so they are not a part of the Community Services Committee's recommendations. And again, I think it's important to note that we as CDD staff, we understand the importance of accountability. We want to hold agencies accountable, and we also want to model that accountability. But for us, it was a decision of prioritizing people over the process and recognizing that they were the only application that significantly were able to identify that they were serving the Asian population. And so when we looked up against the data and recognizing what the data tells us, we wanted to try to do our due diligence, ensuring that that population was also going to be served.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand definitely the need to provide consistency and accountability. Have any and maybe this is a question for Jim, have there been exceptions made for other RFP processes kind of similar to what was considered for Freedom Inc. in this situation?
Alder Curry, I can't give you a specific example of that, but I can assure you that there have been occasions where we have shown flexibility with respect to the RFP parameters. I'm quite sure that in the past we have accepted applications that were submitted a little bit late. It's always difficult to make that decision about where to draw the line if an applicant submits a proposal just a couple of minutes late, or so it's something that we struggle with frequently. I think it's fair to say this is not the first occasion where we would have entertained a proposal that came in late.
Thank you. This is a more on the spot, maybe tougher question, but knowing that multiple RFPs and contracts are handled through the CDD, what would you say in response to a comment or a statement that that invalidates the process or the integrity of the process if exceptions are made?
I do think it's a valid point to raise. Again, Alder, we struggle with it regularly, and in this particular case, I think, as Yolanda mentioned, we chose to afford some flexibility, seeing that this particular applicant was serving a population that might not otherwise be reached, and so we decided not to let the process interfere with the result that we were trying to achieve. But it's a valid concern, and I think we recognize that, and we've wanted to be transparent about it so that council members can make your own decisions.
Sorry, I have one more question. Thank you. Oh my goodness. It'll come back, I promise. Okay. So just from my kind of experience with CDD and contracts through my other job, I know that all over the city and the county, collaborative initiatives are being pushed. And I really appreciate what one of our speakers earlier said, that the undocumented population is not a monolith. Absolutely. And I think that kind of was well explained in Yolanda's decision of how the staff made recommendations. What efforts, considering the uniqueness of each population and each family that's being served, and then also, I think, comfort and familiarity with those organizations that do provide those culturally relevant services, how does CDD encourage collaboration and you all have been placed with a lot of difficult decisions based on very intense and high needs within our community. And so with the amount of funds that were available and the amount of applications that were received, within your philosophy of collaboration, do you see any areas to support in both, I guess, proposals in both the CSC and staff? I guess, what would collaborations look like? What could they look like? And how could we ensure that even though it's still not enough for everybody, that there could still be some collaboration?
Jim, you mind if I jump
Please.
in?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a great question, Alder. And I will say that we do strongly encourage collaborative proposals, collaborative work among organizations. I will say that we probably didn't really specifically point that out in the application guidelines, although we talk about collaborations and partnerships. I don't think we specifically had a section that said, that spoke specifically to submitting a collaborative proposal. But I think what it could look like is, based on the key challenges or the key areas that were identified from the organizations, is if this particular organization has an established transportation service, could that organization kind of take the lead on that particular piece? And if there's another organization that has a language learning program or service in place, could they kind of take the lead on that? So that's kind of what I think about when I think about collaboration, is as agencies, particularly agencies serving one population, how can they collaborate and partner together to say, okay, we will serve these residents and households that need some transportation assistance or support, and we can serve these residents and households who need language learning or some other type of service or support.
Thank you both so much for your answers.
Thank you, Alder. Any other questions of staff? All right, so the substitute is moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Alder Figueroa Cole? Alder, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. So I do want to, just say a couple of things and then perhaps provide amendment. So I don't feel like a new person anymore. It feels like I've been doing this job for a long, long time already. But one theme that often comes up is how the charges from council are interpreted at the staff level. So as we heard Yolanda, or as I hear Yolanda speak and explain to us the processes that they follow, and then hear Alder Curry discuss some irregularities in those processes, I feel like in order for us to be equitable and inclusive, we really need to take a serious look at the processes that we have and make sure that we improve them and that we center all of those services they're centered into equity and inclusion. So this particular grant, I think there's no question in my mind that the equity piece of it is all over it. I mean, we hit the mark at every single level when it comes to equity. We went to the right organizations, they did the research, they did whatever they needed to do. I totally appreciate the service that the community service committee offers to the city. I appreciate the efforts of the volunteers and everything that comes with it. But at the same time, I am a little bit. I mean, when I saw the recommendations that came down from the committee, it really it was surprising to me. It just didn't seem like the committee took a look at the applications in a way that was more inclusive. I am not here to say, let's take funding from the Latinx community. I understand that the largest population in the city, on the country, is the Latinx community. And also when it comes to undocumented, the Latinx community has the largest numbers. What I'm asking and what I'm saying is for us as a finance committee, as a council person, as an elder person, to consider to open up the spaces for other communities to take advantage of this funding. I am not saying that, I'm not denying, I'm not arguing that Latinx is the largest number, but all I'm saying is let's not leave behind other people that are experiencing the same issues. So on that note, Dave, I sent you an email. I'm sorry, my internet is very, very slow, so emailing is painful. If you could please forward that to the rest of the committee, but I'll send an email with the recommendations to bring back most of staff's recommendations. And if you can please take a look at those changes, I would like for a third version to be considered, where we actually share resources with the Asian community as well as all the other non-Latinx communities. If you have any questions about that, I am more than happy to answer. But I don't know, I feel like we talk about inclusion and equity again, but it's not in the concept of the community. We are constantly putting labels on things, and the more labels we use, the farther away we get from the issues. We should be focusing on the issues that these people are experiencing, and they are issues that impact many different ethnic groups across the community. That's what I have.
Alder,
I can make a motion. Sorry, thank you. I will make a motion to, let me just look at my notes real quick here. Just give me 1 second. Okay, I will make a motion to revert back to the CDD recommendations, to staff recommendations, with the exception of taking the $100,000 given to End Abuse Rights Law Center and moving that into the community immigration law. I would like to see the funding for the Catholic Multicultural Center be back to being full. They asked for $100,000. They asked for $150,000. They received $100,000. I would like for that to remain the same. And take the Centro Hispano, get it back to whatever staff gave them. So again, everything that staff provided, with the exception then of moving the funding the community immigration law.
Right. So if your email is like mine, you will have received the table from Alder Figueroa Cole. So Alder, if I'm understanding correctly, your motion is would be an alternate, to move an alternate set of recommendations as laid out in the table that you forwarded to the committee. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. So that's a motion. Is there a second?
I would like to second it, but I don't have the attachment. Maybe my internet, but yeah, I don't have anything.
Alder Verveer?
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with Alderperson Curry. I have not received an email amendment either.
Yeah, so it appears that I may be the only one that has, perhaps because Dave and I are in the same building. So, Alder,
Can I share the screen, or is that possible?
I just sent it again to the members, so you should be receiving it.
All right, so Alder Furman has got it. Alder Curry?
Mayor, I'll second the motion.
All right, so there's a motion and a second on Alder Figueroa Cole's proposal. And so for the folks that are following along at home, just trying to scan through the substantive difference, and I don't have the staff recommendations in front of me, but the substantive difference looks to me like
they're here on the mayor. They're in the column there.
Yeah, no, I see, Alder, but just the names. The substantive difference is that instead of staff's recommendation to fund the End Abuse / Rise Law Center at $100,000, Alder Figueroa Cole is recommending no funding there, and taking that funding, that $100,000, and allocating it to the Community Immigration Law Center instead. All right. So moved and seconded. Questions on the amendment or the alternate? Sorry, we'll try and stay consistent with my language here. Discussion on the alternate? Alder Verveer?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask the author of the amendment to please articulate, though, and if it was already done, I apologize, I missed it, the one difference between this amendment and the CDD staff recommendation to the Community Services Committee.
So thank you, Alder Verveer. Alder Figueroa Cole, would you be willing to respond to that question from your colleague?
Sure. So again, I mean, we heard from the speakers tonight. I think as council, at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to represent everyone in the city, not just, we have to represent everyone in the city. And this particular RFP is targeting our undocumented community. So I believe that the staff recommendations are more balanced when it comes to inclusion. So we hear the staff, the community service staff, went through the selection of the second organization, the community, I gotta go and look at the name here, Community Immigration Law, and they selected to provide funding for them, and I don't have an issue with that. So that's where the only difference from staff comes about. I think funding Freedom Inc. it's important so we can deal with the Southeast Asian communities, I think that any organization that is helping the Hmong community and the African community should be funded. And I think this is a more balanced approach to it.
Alder, if I can retry the question, I think everybody is, at least you've articulated clearly why revert to primarily the staff funding recommendation. I think the question is, why take the funding that staff had allocated to one organization and allocate it to a different organization that staff didn't recommend for funding?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes.
Yes, so those two organizations, again, I am trying to find a balance between the staff recommendations and the committee recommendations. So I feel the committee recommendations went a little too far, serving one community lane. So I'm just trying to revert to the staff input to make sure that I'm not saying that I'm not saying that the community service committee is wrong, about their recommendations. All I'm saying is that we need to be more inclusive. So they recommended the community immigration law, and that's fine, but I want to strike it, but I want to make sure that we include the additional groups. So I'm not coming here saying staff is 100% correct or the community service or committee is 100% correct. I'm just saying we need to work together better, the three units, the council, the community service group, and the staff, to make sure that we're serving the people that we need to serve.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Curry.
Thank you, Mayor. I am supporting the alternate in front of us due to kind of the same reason Alder Figueroa Cole just ended on, spreading out already what we know is not enough funding to a multitude of folks, but being able to have percentages that are more equitable. I think a big piece of that was our testimony from one of the Freedom Inc. staff about the specialization of serving folks who have experienced gender-based violence. And I think she put it as putting people above processes. And I also wanted to comment that this is not a easy choice easy vote, because I know we do have a high population of our Latinx community who are also undocumented. But knowing, the RFPs and competing for pots of money to provide similar services, I, again, would like to implore, or for staff out there, that I could connect with ways to ease the not only RFP fatigue that many nonprofits are currently feeling, but also the tensions that occur based on these funding decisions and mutual communities that are served with them. Yes, and just, I guess, remember the strong community outpouring during, I believe, when COVID-19 just started, and a large fund being put together for the Latinx community. So we do have power as a community come together to make sure that we can do our best to serve needs that continue to be unmet despite getting contracts for RFP awards. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Is there further discussion? Alder Rivera.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could go back to staff questions for a moment, please. There's no objection. Thank you. Could I ask Yolanda, could you please share with us, was the recommendation of the Community Services Committee unanimous? Was it a split vote? If so, could you share what that vote was on the final motion?
Yes, Alder, the vote was unanimous. I believe.
Were there, and I apologize, I would have watched a recording of the meeting if I had known that we would be likely to see amendments at this meeting. So I was more well-grounded in that discussion. Were there separate amendments, or was it one package amendment and that was discussed by the committee and entertained by the committee?
There was separate amendments. It was not unanimous, though. There were, I believe, one committee member, maybe two, that, or one that objected and one that abstained. And I don't know, Jim, if I think you can chime in if that is what you recall.
Alder Verveer, there was the need to split that vote at Community Services because one of the members needed to recuse herself from a portion of the vote.
I see. Thank you. And then one other question again, apologies that I didn't do more homework on this again. I didn't see an amendment coming because we just usually don't overturn recommendations of the Community Services Committee historically. But could one or both of you explain to me the discussion at the committee level as to funding community immigration law and not End Abuse Rights Law Center when they both serve the Latinx community?
So there wasn't really any specific dialogue around why not to fund End Abuse Rights Law Center. There was discussion around funding SILK based on the work that they do in the community in terms of serving the undocumented immigrant population. And one of the committee members shared information around that work that's being done. So that's kind of the gist of the conversation that was had during that meeting around that.
Thank you. I'm continuing to put you on the spot a little here, Yolanda. Apologies. Could you just share why you think the scoring was lower at the staff team level relating to community immigration law?
Sure. So for staff recommendations, we felt that some of the proposals did not, although were able to identify that they served undocumented immigrant population. We felt that some proposals, in terms of what they were proposing to do, was more talking about long-term investment, long-term support versus kind of that immediate, addressing that immediate need of the undocumented immigrant population, and that the Community Immigration Law Center was one of those proposals where we felt the proposed programming focused more on a long-term investment for immigrants seeking refugee status rather than addressing immediate needs. Does that help?
I appreciate all that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa-Cole?
I don't know if this question is for staff, but if you can help me, again, this is me with process related questions. So Alder Verveer just mentioned that he couldn't see the recording of this particular meeting. There's no recording because this particular meeting is not recorded. So how, is there a reason behind that? Is that how can we make sure that those recordings happen? I mean, it's a super important.
Alder, we don't have the capacity to record every city meeting. It's just not possible. And that's not really a conversation that we can have right now.
Okay. So, I mean, I just wondered if there was a process thing. I wanted to understand. Yeah. But anyhow, just to point out to Oliver Verveer, there's no recording. And yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Curry?
Sorry, one more question. Thank you, Alder Verveer, for making me think of this. Yolanda, can you explain of the applications you all received and the ones that were approved for funding by staff? Is there any differentiation between locally based nonprofits or statewide organizations? Yeah, I think that's the question.
That's a good question, Alder. Unfortunately, we did not drill down versus kind of state or county. What we did do is there were some agencies that we know were going to be serving specific areas within the city of Madison. For instance, the North Madison collaborators were going to be serving the north side of Madison, and Rise, Wisconsin was going to be serving kind of 4 distinct areas in the city of Madison, the Allied Drive area, southwest side of Madison, and there are 2 others that I'm forgetting. So those are the 2 applications that specifically mention specific areas within the city of Madison. But that was the only information that we had.
All right, thank you, Alder. I have no other alders in the queue for questions or discussion. Alder Rivera.
Thank you again, Mayor. Just very quickly, I don't feel comfortable supporting the amendment, so I just want to explain why. And that is, as I kind of referenced in a preamble to one of my questions of CBD staff, historically, the Common Council really has tried to respect the committee process for community services funding recommendations. I'm not saying that this amendment does not have tremendous merit at all. I'm just saying that I don't feel comfortable supporting the amendment because of the departure this evening of that traditional role. Not that we're here as rubber stamps or potted plants, and we don't have to roll up our sleeves and do the heavy lifting and read all these applications and so forth. But over the years, we have really tried at the council to not entertain amendments to serve particular purchase of service agencies, and let the professional staff at CDD and the Community Services Committee do this extremely difficult work when they have relatively little funding, and there's always so much more need than we have funding available. So I will not be supporting my friend's amendment at this hour. I very likely will not object tomorrow night at the Common Council meeting, if this amendment prevails today. But I just wanted to explain my vote. It's not based on the merits of the amendment or any particular application that's pending before us with this resolution. It simply is based on the process and how we've tried to keep somewhat of a hands-off approach and let the Community Services Committee make these very, very difficult decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. No other alders in the queue wishing to speak. Is there any objection to me speaking from the chair? Seeing no objection, I just want to add my concerns to Alder Rivera's. Having been an alder who got into a not insignificant amount of trouble trying to line item community services funding in my first budget, I feel very uncomfortable with amending a recommendation on the floor of the Finance Committee. I think it would be much more appropriate to either accept the committee's recommendations or to choose the staff recommendations. But I'm not comfortable mixing the two on the fly. I appreciate the intent. I don't know that there's a correct answer here. But I do think that it is a dangerous precedent for us to not either go with the staff recommendation or the committee recommendation. Alder Figueroa-Cole.
Again, I am not going to disagree with that. So if it makes it more comfortable to go with the staff recommendations, that is fine. I feel, again, that the staff recommendations were more inclusive than the committee's recommendation. That's all I'm asking, to be inclusive, not to leave other people out. That's all I'm asking.
Well, Alder, you made a motion that's on the floor, so.
Okay, so.
Alder Furman.
Mayor, thank you. I was going to ask what the best procedure would be if we wanted to do we have to dispense with Alder Figueroa-Cole's motion? Can she withdraw it? What would be the best way to handle it if we wanted to go with staff recommendations opposed to this hybrid?
So that's up to Alder Figueroa-Cole if she wants to withdraw her alternate And if Alder Curry is the second agrees, then the alternate can be withdrawn, and then anybody can make a motion from there. Or we can vote on the alternate and see where it goes. The base motion at this point is the substitute, but we have to deal with the alternate one way or another first.
So I can withdraw my alternate and go back to the,
That's entirely up to you, Alder.
yeah, that I'm saying I will withdraw it. So.
All right, so Alder Figueroa Cole will withdraw. Alder Curry is fine with that.
Okay.
So the motion before us then is the substitute. Alder Figueroa Cole.
So I like to make a motion to revert back to staff recommendations.
All right, so the motion is to accept the staff recommendation, which is the original resolution, Alder Curry.
Seconding.
All right, so that's a second. Jim would like to weigh in.
Mayor, just looking for guidance here. I believe that the original resolution was introduced by title only, and so the substitute represents really the first. There's not a resolution that has in its body the staff recommendations.
Thank you, Jim, for reminding me of that. So the proper motion and without objection, we'll take it as having been made, is to accept the staff recommendations, and that would be an alternate to accept the staff recommendations. Alder Figueroa Cole?
That's the motion. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alder. So that's the motion before us. Is there further discussion? All right, so the motion is to accept the staff recommendations as an alternate on item 6. Is there objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Alder Verveer? Alder Verveer, would you like a roll call, or do you just wish to be noted as voting no?
Thank you for asking. I just wish to be recorded as voting no on the amendment. Again, process, not substance.
Thank you, Alder Verveer. So we'll note Alder Verveer as voting no, which means that Alders Curry, Figueroa Cole, and Furman are voting aye. Just pausing to confirm. And so with a 3-1 vote, that motion passes, so that we just passed an alternate on item 6 with the staff recommendations. All right, so that takes us to item 7, which is Legistar 69956, authorizing purchase and sale agreement between the city and O'Neill Properties for property at the Center for Industry and Commerce Business Park. We possibly have registrant Kevin Hoffman of District 15 in support available to answer questions. Indeed, we do. Are there any questions for Kevin Hoffman? Seeing none, then Alder Rivera, motion on item 7, please.
I move adoption.
Is there a second? Alder Curry will second. Thank you. Are there questions for staff on item 7? Alder Rivera.
Thank you, Mayor. First, my sincere apologies to the registrant and to staff for having separated this for only a couple of very minor curiosity questions. I appreciate your patience with me. So I think Matt would probably, well, I guess there are two Matts here. So Matt Miklajewski would be the best to respond to these two very quick questions, which I certainly could have asked offline. Thanks again, Matt, for your patience. The first is, could you just give us an update on where we're at with CIC? Do we have many lots that are still available following adoption of this resolution and this sale?
Sure. Thank you, Alder Verveer. I'm happy to say that we actually don't have many lots remaining. Just by way of background for individuals that aren't familiar with the Center for Industry and Commerce, when the city took over that business park about 10 years ago, there was 90 acres of available industrial property. And after this sale and some other potential sales that are on the horizon, we're going to have fewer than 10 acres available for development within the park. So this, along with a recent PSA approved by the council, and what we hope will be another letter of intent coming forward for another site over the next month, is going to significantly reduce the available land within that park.
Thanks for the very positive update, Matt. Appreciate that. And my only other question was, and I presume that I know the answer to this because it was not referenced in the fiscal note, but do we still have any outstanding special assessments at all in the CIC, which I know we had in prior years?
I do not believe that we have any remaining. No.
Very good. So that's why all, as a fiscal note, reflects the money will be deposited in the land acquisition fund. Very good. Again, thanks for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Before we go any further, I'd just like to note that we're at quorum. So I do need all members present to be here and to have your cameras on so that we can make sure that we're not losing quorum. Thank you. All right. So are there any further questions on item 7? Seeing none, is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of item 7? Seeing no objection, we'll record that vote. So that takes us to item 12, which is Legistar 69964, a substitute authorizing a 5-year non-competitive purchase of goods from Frank Beer Distributors as a sole source provider for the City of Madison golf courses. On item 12, can I get a motion, please?
Move adoption of the substitute.
Is there a second? Alder Figueroa will second. Alder Figueroa, questions for staff?
Yeah, I'm sorry, this wasn't the IT one. I don't know what was I thinking. My apologies about that. But so can someone give me a little background of the history of this particular relationship with this sole source vendor, please?
Yep. Superintendent Knapp is here.
Certainly. And so our relationship, we took over operating the concessions and the clubhouse operations for golf courses in 2013. Since that time, we do sell fermented malt beverages at those 4 locations. The way it works in selling beer and fermented malt beverages, mostly beer, right, and seltzers, their wholesalers have regions, right? So we cannot buy every product that you would want to sell. There's somebody you can buy it from, and only somebody you can buy it from. So Frank Distributors is one of 3 distributing companies we work with. They're the largest share of the market for us. They actually do carry the highest amount of craft beers, but they also sell the Miller family, Miller Coors. And so that's why you see them as a sole source with this $50,000 level. Alcohol sales are, beer and fermented malt beverages do vary a little bit. Last year we saw we climbed above that 50,000 just barely, and so we're doing this a little preemptively. We don't know for sure we'll get there, but we want to be prepared for it. But as far as it works, it's truly sole source. Like we buy from all 3 main distributors in the Dane County market for a variety of beverages, adult beverages, but there's not really an option. Like we've been asked before if we could go to Costco. We cannot do that. That would be illegal. Even though the pricing seems like it's better sometimes.
I would agree with that. I was just, again, without understanding the background on these things, I was just thinking like what opportunities are given to other smaller brewers in the area that are also kind of like the other unique. Beers.
So I do not want to, Alder Revere probably has better handle on this from his years on the LRC, but Wisconsin state law is very interesting. There's brewers, right? There's distributors who we're talking about here today. And then there's retailers, right?
Got it.
So we only sell our retail is fermented malt beverages direct to the customer on premise, right? We don't do carry out. That's one thing. And that's our retail niche. In the distributorship, like we can't buy directly from a local brewer. right? That's
Got it.
illegal. Like we have to go through a wholesaler or a distributor. And so the three main distributors in town are, General, Frank, and Wisconsin. We have relationships with all three. The reason you see this one and not the other two is just product level. Just to scope that for you, Wisconsin Floats, they have the Budweiser line. And yes, I know they're all owned by the same people now, Budweiser, Coors, Miller. But Wisconsin distributors, we do about 35,000 with them on average is what we expect this year anyway. And then General, I think is floating about 18 or 20 right now. So in $100,000 market, it's about 50% Frank, 30% Wisconsin, 20% General. And to my knowledge, they're the only three distributors we've ever come across for fermented malt beverages. I do not know the liquor game as well. Hard liquor, but I believe it's pretty similar. It's kind of a structured, it's not a monopoly, but a structured, very heavily regulated distributor relationship. We do not have the option of going directly to others. That said, Alder, I want to be clear. We offer a lot of local brews in our clubhouses. I can tell you for certain at Glenway, because we've done a lot of research preparing for this coming year. At Glenway, in the last year, we were fully open 2019. We sold a significant amount of beer brewed in Dane County, right? So that it's certainly our customers kind of make that selection for us, and that's what our customers want.
Thank you for that background. I appreciate it. That's really all I have. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Verveer.
Thank you. Since you're on a roll here, Eric, and you in January have been patient, I was just curious if there's any thought still at this stage to try to think outside the box and be creative and figure out if there's any way that we can, again, offer other adult beverages at our golf courses, as was the case back in the day when the pros had the licenses. Have you in the city attorney's office had that conversation at all in recent times? See if there's any way we can offer spirits and wine.
Alder, it's a timely question. This came up recently in meeting with a group of women executives who are interested in the league. This actually came up about Glenway and about wine. So we are very aware that we're missing something some people would like to see at our facilities. We're also very aware that the historic viewpoint from the city has been we probably don't have a clear path to doing that. That said, that conversation I just recently had made me realize I have not spoken with the city attorney's office on this issue since before the pandemic. And I think it's about time. And Alder Verveer, thank you for keeping me honest. We try to do this every couple of years because we certainly believe we've demonstrated we can sell fermented malt beverages responsibly with no issues for public safety. We think having that additional flexibility could help with the bottom line, but also help with customers and what they're seeking to come enjoy our facilities. That said, again, as I've said for many years, it will not solve financial woes of the golf courses alone. But it's certainly a piece of a puzzle from a customer service. And so it's ripe for that conversation. I can't tell you how it will go because honestly, I've never spoken to Mike Haas about this issue.
Well, I encourage you to do so, and the other experts in his office. I'm sure it would be popular if we could offer those selections once again, as it's been many years, obviously.
No, absolutely. It's a very good point, and I'm sure Mike is looking forward to hearing from me.
Very good. Thank you in advance. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded for the substitute. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 12. And that is the end of our agenda. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Alder Curry will second. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of adjournment? Seeing no objection, thank you all. We are adjourned. Have a good evening.